You're listening to Legal Bites, a podcast series brought to you by the Food and Beverage Litigation team at Holland & Knight. Our food and beverage litigation team counsels clients on regulations that impact their businesses and mounts smart defenses against claims by competitors, class action plaintiffs, employees and unions, and government agencies. This series offers listeners a seat at the dinner table with our team and industry leader guests whose discussions on current regulatory issues and trends will provide some food for thought to anyone who wants to take a bite out of the legal and regulatory arenas that shape food and beverage law today.
Welcome to our Legal Bites podcast series. Today we have the opportunity to sit down with Ohio State Senator William DeMora of the 25th District, which includes Columbus, Ohio. My name is Charles Weiss, and my co-host is Kristina Merritt. Senator DeMora, thank you for joining and sharing your time with us.
Thank you for having me. I'm excited to be here.
So before we start, I want to answer the question, why are you talking with an elected official on a podcast for food and drug law? Well, as it turns out, the issue we're discussing became something of a hot button topic in Ohio based on a recent decision by the state Supreme Court. Specifically, and you can see the details in a post on our blog that we'll link to. This was a personal injury case in which a restaurant patron was injured quite badly by an unexpected bone in an order of what was on the menu as boneless chicken wing. The bone must have been pretty sharp because it perforated his esophagus. He had a bad infection. He was in the hospital for a while. So we are talking about a serious injury, not something to joke about. So the Ohio courts, all the way up from the trial court to the state Supreme Court, held that the patron's lawsuit against the restaurant and its suppliers could not get to a jury. It was dismissed on summary judgment. At the Ohio Supreme Court, the decision was 4-3, with the majority writing that the customer should have known that boneless chicken wings could have bones. Here's a quote.
Regarding the food items being called a boneless wing, it is common sense that that label was merely a description of the cooking style. A diner reading boneless wings on a menu would no more believe that the restaurant was warranting the absence of bones in the items than believe that the items were made from chicken wings, just as a person eating chicken fingers would know that he had not been served fingers. The food items label on the menu described a cooking style. It was not a guarantee.
So the reference to cooking style in the majority's opinion reflects the fact that the boneless chicken wings here were made from chopped up breasts, not deboned wings. That was news to me when I read the opinion, but I had never really thought about this. The dissenting opinion did not pull any punches. It was full of references to Alice in Wonderland, and here's a quote.
The absurdity of this result is accentuated by some of the majority's explanation for it, which reads like a Lewis Carroll piece of fiction. The majority opinion states that it is common sense that the label boneless wing was merely a description of the cooking style. Jabberwocky. There is, of course, no authority for this assertion because no sensible person has ever written such a thing. The reasonable expectation that a person has when someone sells or serves him or her boneless chicken wings is that the chicken does not have bones in it. Instead of applying the reasonable expectation test to a simple word, boneless, that needs no explanation. The majority has chosen to squint at that word until boneless means you should expect bones.
And the reference here to the reasonable expectation test is the legal test under Ohio law for cases like this, where there is either a foreign or an unexpected item in a piece of food. In other words, what would be the reasonable expectation of the consumer? The case, by the way, is Berkheimer versus REKM LLC, 2024 Ohio, 2787. Now, when I began writing my blog post about what I thought was going to be a pretty dry issue of tort law, I found that the decision had ignited something of a firestorm in Ohio, and that Senator DeMora had spoken out strongly and said that he was exploring the possibility of remedial legislation to address this. And that, of course, is the longer answer to why do you have an Ohio State senator on a food and beverage podcast? So, Senator, can you tell us how you came to engage with this case and why you viewed it as important as a public policy issue and not a case just that was important to the parties?
Obviously, when I heard this decision, I was stunned because my late mother was an English teacher her entire career. When I learned that word boneless now means with bones, not without bones, like the definition of boneless in the dictionary. And as someone who eats both boneless wings and regular wings, this could have been me. This could have been any Ohioan who enjoys chicken wings, whether boneless or ones with bones in them. And this person was seriously injured. And the fact that the majority on the Supreme Court in a 4-3 decision somehow came up with the definition of boneless being a cooking style and not actually meaning no bones, it was mind-boggling to me. And it's just something that I think needs to be addressed by the legislature. I don't know how any reasonable person can think that the word boneless means anything other than without bones. And that is what I have asked our Legislative Service Commission to draft, is legislation that would put a common sense test and allow the jury. This has been decided by a jury, not by 4 members of the House Supreme Court. If the jury of persons, Mr. Burkheimer's peers, would have said that, okay, you should expect this, that'd have been one thing. But of course, I guarantee you they can't find 12 Ohioans that have ever eaten wings before to think that boneless wings are going to have bones in them. And by the way, boneless wings actually cost more. I mean, if you order boneless wings, they are more expensive than regular wings. And people order them and pay more because guess what? They don't have bones in them and don't have to worry about picking the bones off. I mean, so this is a legislative matter. And as far as I'm concerned, it's gotten huge press across Ohio and across the country about how absurd that 4 members of the state Supreme Court can actually think that boneless means anything other than without bones.
So I looked to see where the restaurant is located. It's in Butler County, which is down near Cincinnati. I gather that's not near your district, up near Columbus, and probably you don't know any of the parties here. Is that right?
I don't know them. I mean, Mr. Burkheimer and I have emailed back and forth because he saw me give more than one television interview when this case came out, and we're trying to meet. But obviously, as you said, his health has not been good since the incident. He spent months in the hospital. He still can't walk long distance because it affected his breathing and everything else. So this man has been seriously injured because of this, and it was an 1.5 inch bone. It was not any little piece. It was an 1.5 inch bone that, if you saw the news stories, they showed it on the news stories because Mr. Burkheimer's attorney still has this thing in a jar, an evidence jar, to show you how big this thing was. So I do not know the man personally. I hope to meet him very shortly. But this is just a case of, I mean, I have Ohio State University in my district. I've been eating wings since I was in college. They had Tuesday night was wing night at Ohio State. And I got wings almost every Tuesday night as a student at Ohio State. And I still enjoy the same wings. Even today, I had them last Tuesday. And of course, I get mainly regular wings with that bones in them. But again, this could have been any person in Ohio, my district, any other district, of someone eating a wing that thought had no bones in it and then getting a bone. So it's ridiculous. Again, I don't look out for just my constituents and everything. This is I'm concerned about anybody in the state of Ohio now. And again, I think it's only in Ohio because I was at an event. I saw people from around the country, and this was a joke. I mean, people made an absolute joke of this that, well, Bill, I guess I'm not going to come and have boneless wings in your state because I could die over them because I could have a bone in them.
Yeah, I saw when I was Googling and looking for this that it was even in some of the UK newspapers, actually, and Stephen Colbert referred to it on his show. I saw, although, as I said earlier, it's not a joke because, I mean, Mr. Burkheimer here was badly injured by this.
Well, what Stephen Colbert did was meant to be serious, but was hysterical the way he did it. And the way he portrayed the majority decision was how I think it should be portrayed. It was an absolute joke, but it's now law in Ohio. And Mr. Burkheimer didn't get a jury trial because of this.
So obviously this has generated a lot of attention in the public in Ohio. Have you heard from constituents or other Ohioans about their feeling on this?
Oh, I've heard from everybody. Like I said, I mean, I eat wings all the time, and I have friends that, I mean, every tailgate I have for Ohio State football, we have someone brings wings. And it's been an ongoing joke, the fact that only in Ohio can you get boneless wings with bones. I mean, no one understands it. Regular, ordinary people. I guarantee you, if you went to the corner of Broad and High, which is the corner where the State House in Ohio is located in Columbus, and asked 100 people what they would expect if they got a boneless wing or a regular wing, and they would tell you, well, they expect boneless wings not to have bones in them. So this is, and I've heard from lots of people, emails. Again, I go to events and the people talk to me about this because it has gotten a lot of publicity. I mean, again, Ohio is a laughingstock for the decision by 4 members of our Supreme Court to say that boneless means you can have bones in them. I mean, it's a joke.
Kristina, I know you have a couple of questions.
Yes, thank you, Charles. So, Senator, sometimes we hear about personal injury cases that people think are silly, like someone spilling coffee on themselves and suing because it was too hot. Have you heard anything along those lines?
No, I have not. I mean, I agree that sometimes people have always filed frivolous lawsuits, and the person that gets a hot cup of coffee at McDonald's and spills on their lap and says it's too hot, that's kind of ridiculous. Okay. I mean, who wants cold? Well, unless you want to go get frozen coffee or cold coffee, when you order hot coffee, you expect it to be hot. Again, in this case, though, this man was seriously injured in his esophagus and his lungs by this, the infection hurt his lungs by an 1.5 inch bone. It wasn't just some little sliver, some millimeter sized bone. The bone was 1.5 inches long. And I have not had anybody come up to me and say that this is something that shouldn't have been in front of a jury of the man's peers, because most people think, like the defendant in the case, Mr. Berkheimer, that this is ridiculous, that if you order boneless wings and pay more for them, which you do, I don't know any restaurant other than having some kind of special or deal on some night, that if you on the regular night in the menu, boneless wings are more expensive because they don't have bones in them. So again, I think it's a very serious issue, and it could happen to anybody. And especially now, if you're in Ohio and you have young children, okay, you buy them chicken fingers. Of course, you never expect to have a chicken finger, have a finger in a chicken's finger and chicken fingers. That's ludicrous. If you're going to put that in his opinion, also just shows his lack of common sense. But now younger people who get McNuggets or any of those things that have no bones in them, young people, you know, what 4-year-old in Ohio or anywhere else in the country has not had a chicken McNugget from either Burger King or McDonald's or some other fast food place? Because guess what? The parents buy them for one reason: they don't have bones in them. And now in Ohio, this is all now up for grabs, because now you don't know what they're going to put into a boneless wing or a McDonald's McNugget or stuff. So I think it has serious repercussions everywhere.
Right. So restaurants are important small businesses in just about every city and town. You know, did you receive any pushback from your constituents who own or possibly also operate restaurants?
I have not. And actually, I went to a BW3 again last Tuesday to get wings. And I asked them, I said, now, how does this boneless wing court case going to affect you? And again, BW3 is a national chain. I get it. But the person at that BW3 says, you know, that they've gotten questions now. Are they going to, or do their boneless wings really have no bones in them? So I think it actually hurts small businesses because, again, boneless wings cost more, yet a lot of people get them because of young children or because they don't want to deal with the bones in them. And so they want to eat them you can eat the boneless wings with a fork, as opposed to a regular wing. You can't eat with a fork because you have to have them in your hands. So boneless wings are less messy. You don't have as much waste because of boneless wings, you'll be able to eat the whole thing. So I have had no restaurant in my district or anywhere across Ohio has had any comments to me about why I'm pursuing this, because I think this actually is helping to protect them, because their consumers want something they can depend on. And if you can't depend on a boneless wing not to have bones in it, then I think it's going to hurt their overall bottom line.
Thank you, Senator. The way we came to end up talking with you was when I was working on this, I saw that you had talked about introducing legislation, and you mentioned that earlier as well. Can you tell us more about the legislation that you're looking into with the assistance of the staff in the Ohio State Senate? And is it about food safety, or is it about summary judgment? Because, you know, as you mentioned, this case was decided by judges. It never actually got to trial. It never got to a jury. So have you made any particulars, any further thoughts about what the legislation might look like?
Yeah, so it's going to kind of mirror the dissent of Justice Donnelly. And what I've asked the Legislative Service Commission to put together deals with the standard that a judge would take in a case like this? Would it be common sense or reasonable expectations? And then they couldn't just dismiss it on summary judgment. They would have to allow a jury to hear a case like this because, again, a common sense test, or as Justice Donnelly said, a reasonable expectation test of any regular person would lend itself, if someone had a wing that boneless, and the definition of boneless being without bones, they would have to allow this to go to a jury. So that's why I've told LSC to draft that would take into effect the reasonable expectation test of a regular person, as well as a common sense test, that the judge just couldn't summarily dismiss this because they felt like it, that if the ordinary person, when they got something like a boneless wing, would expect it not to have bones in it, and it did, then that reasonable expectation shouldn't have it bone, it would go to a jury.
Do you think you would get general consensus or a majority or get this to the floor, or do you think this would be stuck in committee? I don't know the process in the Ohio legislature, the way bills advance.
Well, the process is that there's only 7 Democrats out of 33 senators. So I usually don't get anything. I'm guaranteed one hearing of a bill that's introduced before a certain time before the session is over. And I've actually had one bill pass the Senate. It was actually a bill about voting that was bipartisan. I think a case like this, I think I can get a few. I mean, I have several Republican senators who are pro small business, who are pro business, that I think would be co-sponsor of this, because again, I think it helps small businesses who don't want to lose customers over something that's very prevalent on their menu. But again, in the severe minority here, like we have in Ohio, both the House and the Senate, again, it's up to the whims of what the majority wants to do. And again, I don't think this is a partisan issue. Again, this has nothing to do with Democrats, Republicans. It has to do with regular, ordinary Ohioans who eat a lot of wings, who now don't know what they're getting if they order something. So I don't know. I mean, I think this is maybe common sense enough that it might get traction. And I'm going to introduce it before the end of session, because when we have lame duck session in November after the election, and Katie barred the door about what happens in lame duck session every year, this might be something that enough people think, hey, I agree that we want to protect people, and I'll give them their day in court, because again, this could be my child, this could be my nephew, this could be my spouse, or my brother or sister that ate these wings.
So I gather, Senator, this is not the kind of issue that you were thinking about when you decided to enter public service as an elected official, or on the other hand, I mean, maybe it was in a broader sense the kind of thing that you were concerned about.
I mean, when you're elected by people, your job is to look out for their interests, whether it's your district or the state as a whole. And I pride myself on trying to look out for the little guy. I'm someone who cares about the regular, ordinary Ohioan who doesn't have their own lobbyists, who doesn't have the ability to come and sit and testify in committees for days on end, who has to have their elected official look out for their interests. And again, I never thought I'd be dealing with a case that a boneless wing has bones in it, because again, my mother, the English teacher, would have said, well, William, the definition of boneless means without bone. Just look it up in the dictionary. So I never thought I'd be dealing with this case specifically. But again, as a public official who meets with anybody and everybody that wants to come to my office, because again, the State House is here in Columbus. It's a mile from my district, mile from where I live. So people can come to the State House anytime they want and meet with me. I try to look out for them, and even though they're not my district or not. But again, this is common sense. And this affects every Ohioan, because like I said, Ohioans love their wings. And I just think that if they can't count on McDonald's McNuggets or Cane's chicken fingers or something like that, not having bones in them, I think it's going to hurt everybody.
Thank you again, Senator. We've enjoyed hearing from you about this issue and exploring why it caught the public attention in Ohio and nationally and even internationally that it did. Any closing thoughts?
First of all, again, thank you for having me on today. My closing thoughts are, listen, this is some things that we do with the government don't affect everybody or most people. This is something, unless you're a vegetarian or vegan and don't eat meat at all. I can't tell you one of my friends, and I have lots of friends, and I said, I have tailgates every week. Again, since college, I've been eating wings. I can't tell you one person that I know personally that hasn't had a chicken wing, whether boneless or regular wings. And I think it's got national attention because most people can't believe that 4 jurists on the state's highest court would actually to say that boneless is a preparation of food and not what is not supposed to be in the food, meaning no bones. So again, this is a common sense issue that I don't care what party you're with or who you support, but we all eat wings. And if we can not expect to get our favorite boneless wing or chicken finger or McNugget without bones in them, then I think it's going to affect all of us. And we have to now cut them all open and make sure they're little pieces to make sure they don't bone them again. And that's absurd. And the fact that we have to deal with this as a legislature, I think is even more absurd.
Thank you, Senator. With that, we will wrap up things for this episode of our podcast. If any of our listeners have ideas for an episode, or if you might want to be a guest, we would love to hear from you. Our guest today on Legal Bites has been Senator William DeMora of the 25th District in Ohio. Thank you.
Thank you for listening to Legal Bites. For more information on our food and beverage litigation team, please visit hklaw.com/food and beverage.